October 2021. A group of cavers is exploring abandoned mines in northern Arizona. This is their usual activity, their hobby. They descend into another shaft long since collapsed and forgotten. The air inside is heavy, smelling of dust and damp. The beam of a flashlight picks up something strange on the wall. It's not a rock or old equipment. It's two sleeping bags. They lie side by side, tightly packed. But the most terrifying thing is that they are sewn up roughly by hand with thick thread. The cavers call the police. When the bags are opened, human remains are found inside. An examination confirms that they are Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards, who went missing 11 years ago. This discovery did not provide any answers. It raised even more questions. The story of their disappearance and death is a tangled web of inexplicable details with no leads, no suspects, and no logical explanation. To understand what happened, we need to go back to June 2010. 26-year-old Ray Larson and 24-year-old Nicole Edwards were a normal couple. They had been dating for about 2 years, lived in Phoenix, and enjoyed traveling. Ree worked as a graphic designer, and Nicole was a nurse. They weren't extreme sports enthusiasts or wilderness adventurers. They just loved to get out into nature, pitch a tent, and look at the stars. That June, they planned a short trip through northern Arizona. The route was straightforward. Drive north, visit the Grand Canyon, and then return, stopping at interesting places along the way. They packed everything they needed: a tent, sleeping bags, a camping stove, food, and water. They took a camera with them to take pictures. For them, it was just another romantic weekend getaway. They left Phoenix on Friday morning in their car, a silver Toyota Corolla sedan. The car was in good condition and had recently passed inspection. They didn't share any concerns or strange premonitions with anyone. On the contrary, according to their friends, they were in high spirits and looking forward to the trip. They were last seen alive on Saturday, June 12th. They stopped at a gas station near the south entrance to Grand Canyon National Park. The cashier later recalled them as a typical young couple. They bought gas, a bottle of water, and a bag of chips. Ree was driving, and Nicole was in the passenger seat, looking at a map. They didn't talk to anyone and seemed calm. The cashier didn't notice any other cars behind them or anyone following them. After filling up, they headed south on Highway 180. That was the last confirmed location where they were seen. After that, nothing. Nicole was supposed to call her mother on Sunday evening. It was their tradition. She always called after a trip. The call never came. At first, her mother wasn't worried. Maybe they were delayed. Maybe there was no cell service. It had happened before. But when they didn't show up for work on Monday morning, panic set in. Ree and Nicole's co-workers sounded the alarm. Calls to their cell phones went straight to voicemail. Relatives called all the hospitals and police stations along their presumed route. No information, no accidents or incidents involving a couple or car matching their description. By Monday evening, more than 24 hours after they were due to return, their families filed official missing persons reports. The police began standard procedures. A warrant was issued to track their cell phones and bank cards. The phones had been turned off since Saturday. The last signal was recorded not far from the area where they were seen at the gas station. The bank cards had not been used since the purchase of gasoline. This was a bad sign. People who simply got lost or decided to extend their vacation usually continue to use their phones and money. A search operation began. Police and volunteers combed the area along Highway 180. Helicopters surveyed the area from the air. Northern Arizona is a vast expanse. Forests, canyons, and desert areas. Finding something here was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The search went on for several days, but yielded no results. No car, no traces. It seemed as if Ray and Nicole had vanished into thin air. A week after their disappearance, on June 19th, a Forest Service patrolman stumbled upon their car. The Toyota was parked at the junction of an old abandoned logging road several dozen miles south of where they were last seen. The road led deep into the forest and was barely visible from the main highway. The car was locked. At first glance, everything seemed fine. There were no broken windows or signs of a break-in. When a forensic team opened the vehicle, the mysteries only deepened. Everything inside was in its place. Their tent, 2 sleeping bags, and backpacks with clothes were in the back seat. In the glove compartment were Rhea and Nicole's documents, wallets with cash and bank cards. On the front seat was an open map, and the same bag of chips half-eaten. The car keys were on the driver's seat. There were absolutely no signs of a struggle. No blood stains, no torn clothes, no traces of anyone else's presence. It looked as if Ray and Nicole had stopped, gotten out of the car, and left, leaving all their belongings behind. It was completely illogical. Why would they abandon the car with the keys, documents, and money inside? If they went for a walk, why didn't they at least take water or their phones with them? The police thoroughly searched the area around the car. Sniffer dogs picked up a scent, but it trailed off after a few hundred yards on a rocky stretch, where further tracking became impossible. No footprints were found except for those of Ray and Nicole's boots, which led from the car. There were no traces of another vehicle that could have pulled up and taken them away. Forensic experts processed the car for fingerprints. They found only the prints of Ray and Nicole, nothing else. The theory that they got lost was ruled out almost immediately. They left everything they needed to survive in the car. The theory of voluntary disappearance also did not withstand scrutiny. Why leave all their money and documents behind? It looked like preparation for suicide, but then why drive so far and abandon the car in such a way? The leading theory was kidnapping, but it didn't match the facts either. The lack of signs of a struggle in and around the car stumped the investigators. If they had been attacked, it would have happened somewhere else. Perhaps they had stopped to help someone on the road, or they had been stopped by people posing as police officers. Investigators began to work on this theory. They interviewed everyone who could have been driving on Highway 180 that day. They studied surveillance camera footage from all gas stations and stores within a 100 m radius. It was a titanic task. Several witnesses came forward who had seen a similar silver sedan that day, but no one could remember anything unusual. No one saw anyone following them or stopping anywhere to talk to anyone. The case was at a dead end. The search continued for several more weeks, but to no avail. The forest was silent. Volunteers and police combed hundreds of square miles. They searched abandoned buildings, old huts, and descended into shallow ravines. Nothing. Eventually, the active search was called off. The case of Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards was classified as cold. Photos of the smiling couple hung in police stations and on bulletin boards. Their families continued to believe and wait. But with each passing year, their hopes grew dimmer. For 11 years, the case remained stagnant. No new clues, no witnesses, just emptiness. A complete and utter lack of information. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed them whole. And as it turned out later, in a sense, that was precisely what had happened. Years passed. Ray and Nicole's case gathered dust in the archives. Every few years, a new detective assigned to the cold case department would reread the file, and every time they would come to the same conclusion. There was nothing, not a single thread, to pull on. The lack of evidence was so complete that it seemed unnatural. In the age of digital technology, when every step leaves a trace, Ray and Nicole managed to disappear without a trace. Their story became the subject of discussion on internet forums dedicated to unsolved crimes. Enthusiasts from all over the world constructed theories, each more insane than the last. Some suggested that they had fallen victim to a serial killer who traveled the highways hunting tourists. Others believed that they had stumbled upon an underground drug lab in the woods and had been eliminated as unwanted witnesses. The police investigated these theories. They compared the case to other disappearances nationwide. No matches. They checked Ray and Nicole for any possible connection to the criminal world. Nothing. They were ordinary people. The most popular theory among internet sleuths was that the couple had encountered someone who lived in the woods as a recluse, maybe a veteran with PTSD or just a sociopath who didn't want to be bothered. According to this version, Rhea and Nicole accidentally wandered onto his property. He could have forced them to go with him at gunpoint. That would explain why they abandoned the car without any signs of a struggle. He could have held them for a while and then killed them. This theory seemed plausible, but it was impossible to prove. The forests in northern Arizona are vast, and finding someone who doesn't want to be seen is virtually impossible. Rhea and Nicole's families never gave up. They gave interviews, hired private investigators, and maintained a website dedicated to the search for the missing person. But time passed and hope faded. The case became a local legend, a terrifying story about a couple who'd been swallowed by the forest. Then in October 2021, that legend became a shocking reality. It all started with a group of 3 amateur cavers. They were experienced explorers who spent their weekends exploring the old abandoned mines that the region. Many of these mines date back to the 19th century gold rush. They were not marked on maps, and their entrances were often blocked or hidden by vegetation. On that day, they stumbled upon one such mine. The entrance was almost entirely blocked by rocks and overgrown with bushes. It was obvious that no one had been here for a very, very long time. With difficulty, they cleared the debris and saw a vertical shaft leading into the darkness. They estimated the depth to be approximately 100 feet, or about 30 m. It was a dangerous but interesting find. They secured ropes and began their descent. The most experienced member of the group went first. The air was stifling and smelled of damp earth and rot. The beam of his headlamp slid across the uneven walls of the shaft, covered with mineral deposits. Reaching the bottom, the caver looked around. The bottom of the shaft was littered with debris and fallen rock. He shone his flashlight into the far corner and froze. There, leaning against the wall, were 2 oblong objects. At first, he thought they were just garbage bags left behind by someone many years ago. But when he got closer, he was overcome by a bad feeling. They were 2 old sleeping bags. One was blue, the other green. The fabric was faded and covered with dust, but it was clear that they hadn't been lying there for 100 years. The strangest and most frightening thing was that the zippers on the bags had been sewn shut. Not just zipped, but sewn along the entire length with thick, coarse thread that looked like twine. The stitches were uneven, clearly done by hand. At that moment, the caver realized that he had found something more than just trash. He smelled a faint but unmistakable odor of decay. He didn't touch anything. He radioed his companions above that they needed to get out of there immediately and call the police. Once they reached the surface, they struggled to find a place where their cell phones would work and dialed 911. The county sheriff and several of his deputies arrived at the scene. The location was so remote that they had to drive there in SUVs and walk the last part of the way. After cordoning off the area, the sheriff realized that he was dealing with a potential crime scene. A team of forensic experts was called in. The work was difficult and slow. First, they had to secure the descent into the mine. Then, a forensic expert descended to document everything at the scene. He took dozens of photos of the sleeping bags from different angles and took air and soil samples around them. Only then did the recovery operation begin. The bags were lifted very carefully, one at a time, using a system of blocks and pulleys. Once on the surface, they were placed in special airtight containers and immediately sent to a medical examiner's laboratory. At this stage, investigators were almost sure that they had found the bodies of Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards. No other couples had disappeared in similar circumstances in the area in the previous 11 years. The laboratory confirmed the worst fears. When the bags were opened, skeletal human remains were found inside. After comparing dental records, experts identified them with 100% certainty. It was Ray and Nicole. The 11-year search was over, but the investigation was beginning, and it immediately encountered new, even more gruesome mysteries. The autopsy results shocked even experienced detectives. The cause of Ray Larson's death was a traumatic brain injury caused by at least one decisive blow to the back of the head with a heavy blunt object. The fracture was so severe that there was no chance of survival. Nicole Edwards had damage to the delicate bones in her neck, a sure sign that she had been strangled. They had been murdered. This was not just a disappearance, but a brutal double murder. But the most critical and inexplicable fact came from the report of the forensic entomologist and pathologist. After examining the condition of the remains and the residual activity of insects, the experts reached a conclusion that completely altered the picture of the crime. Ray and Nicole's bodies were not placed in sleeping bags and dumped in the mine immediately after their deaths. They had been lying in some other place for at least 24 hours and possibly as long as 48. This meant that the killer or killers had not simply killed them in a fit of rage somewhere in the woods. They killed them, then took the bodies and hid them somewhere for a day or two. Only then did they bring them to this abandoned mine, sew them into sleeping bags, and throw them down. This fact rendered all the simple theories obsolete. This didn't look like a chance encounter with a psychopathic recluse. It pointed to a cold-blooded, well-thought-out plan to hide the bodies. Someone had gone to great lengths to get rid of them. But why? And where did he hide the bodies for a whole day? No signs of violence were found on the surface of the bags or on the bodies themselves that could indicate how they were transported. The investigation, which seemed to have finally gained momentum, had actually reached a new, even darker and more confusing dead end. Now the police had the bodies and the cause of death. Still, the motive and the identity of the killer were as elusive as they had been 11 years ago. The discovery of Ray and Nicole's bodies did not close the case. It reopened it, but put the investigation in an even more difficult position. The key mystery that the detectives were struggling with was the very time frame, 24 or even 48 hours, between the murders and the concealment of the bodies. This fact indicated that the killer was not just a random psychopath who attacked a couple in the woods and in a panic hid the bodies in the nearest pit. This was someone who had a safe place to hide 2 bodies for up to 2 days. It could have been a basement, a secluded garage, an abandoned shed, or some other structure where no one would disturb him. This meant that the perpetrator was most likely a local resident or at least had regular access to some property in the area. The theory of a visiting serial killer or random tourist was becoming less and less likely. The police began to piece together the crime again. They compared 2 key locations: the spot where the car was found and the mine where the bodies were discovered. The distance between them was about 50 miles by road, part of which was rough forest trails. To travel from one place to another, you would need a suitable vehicle, most likely an SUV or pickup truck, and excellent knowledge of the area. The killer must have been aware of the existence of this particular long-abandoned mine, the entrance to which was hidden from view. This is another point in favor of the local resident theory. Investigators dug up all the archival data. They began checking property owners within a radius of several dozen miles from the mine. They studied lists of everyone with a criminal record for violent crimes who lived in the area in 2010. They checked hunters, former miners, foresters, anyone who could know these woods inside out. It was a tremendous amount of work, but it yielded no results. None of the people they checked had an apparent motive or an alibi for those days. Criminologists focused on the evidence obtained from the mine. The sleeping bags and the burlap they were sewn would become the primary focus of the investigation. The fabric of the bags was ordinary nylon sold in thousands of stores nationwide. The twine was also the most common type. There were no unique fibers or manufacturing markers. Experts searched for DNA traces on them. After 11 years underground, the chances were slim. They found a few unidentified fragments, but they were too degraded to be identified. No fingerprints, no hair, nothing else that could point to the killer's identity. It was another dead end. The killer had either worn gloves or was simply very lucky. With the new information, the police resumed questioning witnesses. They returned to the gas station attendant, the tourists who had stayed at nearby campsites, and the residents of small towns along the highway. But after 11 years, human memory is an unreliable source. No one could remember anything new. The police issued a new appeal to the public, this time with specific details. They asked anyone who had seen any suspicious activity in the area where the mine was found in June 2010 to report it. Someone may have heard the sound of a car at night or seen headlights in the forest where they shouldn't have been. There was a response, but all the reports were either inaccurate or irrelevant. Now, investigators were trying to build a psychological profile of the killer. This was a man capable of extreme cruelty, yet cold-blooded and calculating. He killed 2 people in different ways, one with brute force, the other quietly and personally by strangulation. This could indicate that the killer was alone, and that he first neutralized Ray as a physical threat, and then dealt with Nicole. He was strong enough to move 2 bodies on his own. He was organized. Murder, storing the bodies, transporting them, hiding them. Every step required planning. The most crucial question, motive, remained unanswered. It wasn't robbery. All the valuables were left in the car. Was it sexual assault? Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the medical examiner was unable to give a definitive answer. This terrible possibility remained hanging in the air. There was no evidence of personal revenge. Neither Ray nor Nicole had any enemies or dark secrets. At least none that anyone was aware of. The most disturbing and most likely version remained. Ray and Nicole were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. They accidentally encountered a predator who lived among ordinary people but led a double life. A man who knew the local woods like the back of his hand and used them as his hunting grounds. Perhaps he stopped them on the road under some pretext. Maybe they stopped to take a picture of the landscape, and he approached them. What happened in the first minutes of their encounter will forever remain a mystery, but the end of this encounter was monstrous. He killed them, and then instead of running away in panic, he calmly took the bodies to his home or another hiding place he knew. He kept them there for a day or two, perhaps just waiting for the right time of day to get rid of them for good. The act of sewing the bodies into sleeping bags was a final touch in this ritual of concealment. It was done not only to hide the bodies, but also to package them, to turn them into faceless cargo. To this day, the murder of Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards remains unsolved. It has gone cold again, but now the case file is marked double murder. Investigators have the victims. They have an understanding of how they died and how they were disposed of, but they don't have a single lead that could point to the killer. The families have the remains of their children, but they didn't get answers or justice. The killer, who kept a secret for 11 years, is most likely still out there. He could be someone's neighbor, coworker, or just a regular resident of a small Arizona town. A man who one day in June 2010 met a young couple on a forest road, took their lives, and then returned his own as if nothing had happened.